All right. I believe we have almost 200 people listening, so, third time's the charm. And let's delve straight into this. Let me just bring up this. So we had, I think, almost 100 questions preloaded. So we'll just in the interest of time, I know there's a lot of key topics that people want covered. A lot of similar questions were asked by the community. So we'll do a bit of a quick fire round of AMA just based with these pre-prepared questions, and then we'll open it up to anyone to jump up and ask your own questions. For those of you who don't know, I'm Smeele, co-founder and CEO of Non-Fungible Labs, now stepped into the position of VP of Community for Futureverse, and I am joined by the esteemed Aaron McDonald, founder of basically everything that you see that has anything remotely Futureverse attached to it. Aaron, let's start you off with a pretty straightforward one. Can you explain, like I'm 5, why the root network is a better decision than an Ethereum layer 2?
Yeah, it's an odd question to begin with, because in a way it kind of is a layer 2 to Ethereum. So the root network performs like 2 functions. It's its own layer 1, capable of supporting its own applications and runtimes natively, but also can act as a layer 2 to other chains. And I think one of the things that we've been really deliberate about is being openness and interoperability maxis. And so the question of why you would build on root directly as opposed to build something on, say, ETH layer 1 and then bridge for layer 2, is because Root's native implementation is designed with a much better user experience in mind. And if you've interacted so far with any of the kind of tests we've been putting out to the community leading up until the public full launch of Root, you would have noticed that that user experience is really a silky smooth journey for those people who are coming on to a new blockchain for the first time. And we get that through the way that we've built the runtimes inside of Root directly. And so you come through that onboarding journey and those features around user safety and the future pass and stuff like that. That's why we think people will want to primarily build on Root and not on another layer 1 or other layer 2s, which essentially replicate the same layer 1 experience, but with some performance enhancements around gas and block confirmations. Whereas the Root layer 1 has been built from the ground up to deliver that really smooth onboarding journey and that user safety experience on chain. The other thing I think's important to note, that Root isn't just a blockchain. It's actually a set of tools built into the chain or anchored into the chain for optimizing interoperability of content in the metaverse. And so when you're interacting with Root, it's not just performing the standard types of functions that you'd expect from a regular layer 1. It's also got these quite deep hooks built in around things like asset interoperability with the asset register or identity interoperability with the identity protocol, and social protocols for the communications and social graphs. And so it's not just performing the functions of a blockchain, it's the anchor for these other services which create that overall user experience that we're hoping will connect the open metaverse in a much better way, in a much more interoperable way than what we've seen in the past.
Amazing, very comprehensive answer. Obviously, as we've launched the Root Root network in its current stages and look to scale it out further, there's a couple questions here asking around the nature of kind of decentralization with the Root network. I guess particularly in terms of the number of validators.
Yeah.
What is the route forward in terms of kind of increasing decentralization?
I mean, yeah, decentralization itself is a pretty loaded word, but I think what we want to do is to have a good level of community participation in running the infrastructure, have that infrastructure be permissionless in nature, and make sure we get the right performance. And that's kind of the triangle of things you're trying to achieve. We are using industry best, practices and protocols for the base layer of this. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's using, a delegated proof of stake system, which allows both economic decentralization and the opportunity for communities to run validators and compete to run validators to provide the most efficient infrastructure for the network. On top of that, the method by which we're distributing the power in the consensus protocol, which is in the form of the root tokens. That's really what makes up the security of the network, is done in a fully community-driven way. The whole future past, future score system is designed to get all of the tokens into the hands of the community, and for them to be active in the process of participating in that rewards program, so that they're a member contributing to the network itself. And so you've got two things happening there. One is a wide distribution of power, and also an active community that's engaged in the process of being part of the operations, the testing, the using of the root network. And in the last stage, in our second roadmap phase, we're going to make some changes to the way validator rewards work in the network, which will allow more participants to run a node with lower stake thresholds and still be able to gain rewards in the network, which will give incentive for more people to run infrastructure and provide more validators in the set for the network.
Amazing. And obviously you touched on a few interesting points there around staking and rewards, which we will definitely loop back to shortly. There's a lot of key questions there. But one question I saw come through a couple of times as well, which is how do we, what is the path forward for the root network in terms of encouraging developers to come and build on root network? As you said, this is, the very nature of decentralization requires a massive communal effort. So what are we as Futureverse doing to incentivize new developers and to attract new talent to build on this suite of tools?
Yeah, I think we've been really clear in the past about our plan having, 3 prongs. And the first prong is, fortunately, we've got all this great first-party content and applications that we can deploy ourselves to test the network and to help us optimize it and make sure it's ready for kind of prime time. That's something that not a lot of layer ones start with, and so having that pretty awesome existing ecosystem of applications and content to get us off the ground is the first step. And what that does is it kind of proves that everything works as it should and gives us the chance to work with our community to optimize that experience. The next stage is us working with our close partners, and we've gone out and got partners in those 5 categories we've talked about before to help us create a center of gravity of users and content around those partnerships. Which will then in turn provide incentives for people to want to come and build in that ecosystem, and we'll support that through programs like the Born Ready Accelerator program, which will open the door for smaller, earlier stage organizations to come and work with us and to provide community incentives and programs around that, and also using the reward mechanisms that are built into things like Future Score to help partners who are wanting to onboard into the space to provide incentives to users to come in and start to use their applications that they deploy on the network. So if you kind of put those three things together, we've got this base of content that we can test and prove everything works. We can build a center of gravity around users and content with our partnerships, brand partnerships, and then we can foster and incubate a broader community through the accelerator programs and reward programs.
Amazing, exciting stuff. Now, there's a few kind of technical feature questions here that we'll just cover quickly, and then we'll get back into some of the meatier topics. There's a question here: does the Root network natively support multi-sig wallets? Yeah, so
a version of what was asked in this question, I think, is something that will be available within FuturePass. We think delegated permissions is a big part of our user experience, and we're hoping to go one step further than a traditional multi-sig in that environment. And so short answer is yes. Long answer is, the FuturePass will contain something which is a bit more comprehensive than your traditional multi-sig.
Yeah, and I guess some of the context to that question as well was really in a way of managing when multi-sig is required, obviously for sending larger transactions or assets, as opposed to just signing as just a simple signature, which can be done by a single party.
Yeah.
There's also a question here around the ability to download our history as a CSV from the Root Explorer,
totally.
which I can see here. It wasn't on the roadmap, but it is now.
But thanks for your question, it now is.
Exactly. There was one other one here. So the question here, we don't need a different wallet to interact with the Root network because it's EVM compatible compared to, for example, Solana. And we don't even have to change networks when minting goblins compared to Polygon. And enter any custom RPC. How is that possible, and how will interaction with the Root network look like in the future when it comes to this kind of multi-chain interaction?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the cool things about the way FuturePass is set up, is that we want to make the experience for those who are interacting with it to be as seamless as possible, and part of that process allows us to link chain or wallets on different chains, accounts on different chains to FuturePass, and thereby get a more seamless experience when it comes to doing something that exists between those two environments or those two chains. And so as we roll out the next versions of FuturePass, the next major release coming out in May, we'll go a step deeper in the feature set there and allow more users to do more with those delegations. Because our view is that while a lot of the stuff that we build will be based on Root, people still might want to keep assets, in the chains where they are, and having to bridge assets across is actually it's a user safety and security risk. And so if we can get what we've done already to extend to more chains, that means that we can have assets on different chains interact with applications inside the Futureverse ecosystem in a way that is safe for users and more seamless. And so when we talked earlier about interoperability being a really core focus of the toolkit, this is one of the things we want to promote, is not necessarily having to move assets just for the sake of it, but give people the experience that they want inside the application, no matter where the assets are, and have that kind of interoperability feature anchored inside a Root network.
Amazing. And I mean, that touches on, the end goal here really is that to make the technology as invisible as possible. That's when we truly achieve mass adoption, is when people are using it without realizing. You touched on security as a point there a couple times. In general, what are some of the security features that distinguish the Root network from, say, the Ethereum network?
I think at the top layer, the good thing is that we're actually not reinventing the wheel here. The Root network derives its security from a similar delegated proof of stake model as Ethereum. It's actually based on the same algorithms as Polkadot. And so these are kind of already battle tested in the market. And people spend a lot of time talking about this, but actually we see very few problems with consensus failures or Byzantine, fault problems in these networks these days. The bigger problem is actually on user safety. And so when you talk about security at the network layer, that's a pretty easy box to tick, because we're not reinventing the wheel. We're using stuff that's pretty well battle tested. But actually where the innovation is in Root is around that user safety, because that's where most of the issues happen for end users. And so when you think about how we're looking at security, it's not just at the network layer, because that is, although it's important, it's kind of a solved problem. It's actually what can we do to make the user experience a safer place to be, and that's where things like FuturePass and the delegated permissions and this architecture around multi-chain support comes into play, because each one of those decisions is about how do you make it safer for the user, which enhances the overall model of security. And security itself is not just, when you look at it, there's kind of three chunks or three S's to it. You've got that safety, which we're talking about in terms of the controls that you can give users. There's the security, which is that stuff at the kind of infrastructure layer. And then, the last bit is simplicity. If you make things simple for users and there's less complexity in the user journey, then they're less likely to make mistakes, which again contributes to their overall safety. And that's how we're thinking about security, is it not one-dimensional.
Brilliant. Great to hear. And, having worked very closely with the likes of the incredible Marco Brondani for not nearly as long as you have, I can see we're in very safe hands there. I actually just wanted to take a moment here to give a big shout out to the entire team working on the Root network and the suite of applications that sit on top of it as well. It's an absolutely monumental undertaking. And yeah, all of those people asking when Root, it's not a simple, straightforward to just build, one of the most seamless, interoperable blockchain Web3 experiences out there. So massive shout out to all the incredible work that's being done behind the scenes by that team. Back into the questions though, is the Root network fully open source, and has the code already undergone an audit?
Yes, so the network definitely will be, or the code definitely will be open sourced at the completion of the audits, and we're just in the process of doing those audits now as a requirement for the exchange listings, native integrations for exchange listings. So yes, we'll be fully open sourced as soon as we get these first stage audits completed. Everyone will be able to jump in and have a look at the source and play with it.
Nice. And I know there's
and you can see why we've been taking a bit of a cautious approach to how we release functionality of Root until that full audit process is complete.
Of course. You touched on exchange listings there. I know we can't go too much into that just in terms of the nature of that entire process. But is there anything that you can discuss in terms of like decentralized exchanges for the Root network?
Yeah, we actually have a third party building the first DEX UX on top of the Root network's native decentralized exchange runtime. So unlike say Ethereum, where your exchanges sit on top of the smart contract layer, the Root network has exchange and marketplace functionalities built into the runtime. And again, this is part of this whole interoperability drive, which is to make sure that not only can tokens exist in a similar format within the database structure of the chain, which is what a lot of interoperability in other chains relies on, but actually we can have that deeper layer of content interoperability as well. And so that first DEX will come live, but also I think in May, along with the marketplace for first marketplace interface for NFTs, both using the kind of core features of the Root Network's runtimes. And then it's open season to any developers out there that want to go and build alternates or better interfaces or unique use cases on top of those things.
Yeah, and what you're saying there was it may be soon, but definitely this quarter. to paraphrase. All right.
That's what you're saying.
Okay, I'm managing expectations here slightly. And in terms of the DEX, that will be obviously supporting the native tokens on the Root network, like Root and XRP, but then also working with sort of wrapped tokens from, say, Ethereum.
Yeah, anything that's bridged across can be supported, both in the market, the NFT marketplace, and in the fungible token exchange.
Amazing. Let me just see. There was a.
We'll actually go a step further down the road with the DEX and integrate natively to the new AMM on XRPL once it goes live, and so be able to source liquidity on Root for from the XRPL mainnet, which I think will add quite a good boost to overall liquidity inside of Root.
Sounds like I have more reading to do tonight. So going on from there's a question here while we're on the topic of token economy. As a multi-token economy, will tokens other than Root be required to lock up Root to be part of the network? If not, how will these tokens drive value in the network?
Yeah, so only Root is required to stake, and only Root is available to stake. The other protocol tokens are creating utility for their own specific purposes. So if you think about something like Silo protocol driving the communications layer, which isn't the same kind of token economics that you need for a core network security or layer 1 security, that derives its utility value from that. We're actually going to be making quite a big change to the utility for Silo token as part of the rollout of some of our features on Root Network, which will increase the scope of things that are covered by Silo in terms of use cases. And so that was something we're looking forward to speaking more about. But take each one of those three core tokens, ASMs, ASTO token, Silos token, or Root Network, they're all doing a specific job, and the economics of those things are tuned for that specific job. In the same way that multiple token economies thrive on top of ETH as a layer 1, where ETH is used for staking, we'll see that same thing emerge for protocol-specific tokens inside of the Root Network.
Amazing. There's a question here around, while we're still on all things token and DeFi, will there be a Root incentivized liquidity pooling versus, for example, XRP or ETH? Will there be single-sided staking with earnings for Roots? Will Root be multi-chain, also on other chains? And what is the issuance rate of Root for the first year? That's, I guess, 4 questions in one.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the DeFi side of things, there's 2 answers to that. Really, the first answer is really it's up to the community. Like, we're building the infrastructure and the core protocols, but what people do with those things are as with all layer 1s, up to the community. And so all of those things are possible. The feature set exists there to do that. I'm sure people out there will want to be involved in doing those things. Us as an organization, we have to kind of stay a little bit neutral to that stuff, for different reasons, including the regulatory ones. But But all of that stuff is possible, and I'm sure people are already working on those different types of use cases. In terms of multi-chain support, definitely answer to that is, we are embracing a multi-chain world, and we're trying to make that world a lot more smooth and interoperable for users. So Root will be available on other networks, and we'll just kind of follow the community lead on that front in terms of which are the right steps to make to kind of increase adoption and liquidity.
Amazing. Can you please elaborate on the data market, in the Futureverse white paper? Will Root have an integration with the likes of BNB, Greenfield, Jasmy, and or Filecoin as options via the token service platform?
Yeah, again, we're providing the frameworks for this, and love to see how people go and innovate from them. Part of the reason for having the accelerator program with Born Ready is to have people make proposals around these things and start to build out connectivity from the Root network. There's no way that we can do everything ourselves, and we're not trying to do that either. That's not how Web3 is supposed to work. But we want to provide the best tools available for people to come and build value where they see that being required. In terms of specifically around the data market side of things, that's something that we'll talk a little bit more about when we dive into the new use cases around the silo token, because I think that in itself deserves its own spaces.
Amazing. Now, there's a question here around the testnet for Root Network. So just to be clear, there is a testnet for the Root Network. It's called Porcini, for you Mycelium fans out there. When is that Porcini currently available to external developers? If not, when do we expect to make that available, along with kind of additional developer documentation? Obviously, we're not expecting, firm dates here as such, but just a general kind of timeline of how we continue to open it up to more external developers.
Yeah, so that's going to line up with our accelerator program. And so as part of that, we'll be onboarding the first external developers into, there are actually already a bunch working on some of those kind of core applications like we talked about earlier. But the first kind of public call to external developers to come and build with us, and that accelerator intake kicking off in this quarter, alongside all the developer documentation, etc.
Amazing. There's one question here just around moving assets between wallets over the past 2 years when it comes to hot cold wallets. And kind of security processes like that. How would you recommend people like me set up our Futureverse accounts? I'm assuming that's a future pass. Should we just use our hot warm wallet to transfer our assets, or will there be a way to delegate our cold wallets so that we have the best chance of having a higher future score?
Yeah, so that's what Future Pass V2 is all about, is account delegation and linking. So being able to connect your wallets and your assets wherever they are is a pretty important thing for us. Like we talked about earlier around user safety, we don't want people to have to, move wallets or try and game the system, optimize it by spreading assets out or things like that. Just keep it simple. Link the wallets you want to the Future Pass account you want to, and it will contribute to the future score.
All right. Moving on to a slightly different topic. There's obviously been a lot of attention currently on our mate Gary in the SEC in the US. What is, what processes are we currently undertaking to ensure that we're following best practices when it comes to all of these regulatory landmines?
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that is it's an evolving landscape, and I don't think anyone has the bulletproof answer to that question. What we try and do is keep up to pace with what regulators are saying and doing around the world, have conversations with them when they're available to have those conversations, seek legal counsel in the jurisdictions that we operate in, and make sure that we're getting good advice in those processes, and generally try and err on the side of caution, and making sure that we're trying to be as transparent as possible and as fair as possible in those processes. You can see that coming through in the way that we changed the way that the Root Network token was rolling out to make that very, very much community driven. No token pre-sale, distribution by participation. Those kinds of things are taking the best of what we know about the current environment and applying them in the way that we're engaging people in this process. Ultimately, regulatory clarity in some markets is pretty good, but in others it's pretty bad. And so hopefully we continue to get more clarity, and we can keep adjusting to stay ahead of where regulators are moving. I think so far we've done a pretty good job to stay on the right side of the ledger, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. There's a very straightforward question here, which I think if anyone's listened to you speak at all in the past will know this is not the case. Is the Root Network just a subnet of the XRPL, a walled garden per se? No, we are all about ripping down the walls in these gardens. But that does lead us quite well into the next question, just around the nature
and I think
of...
just to say that it's very clearly much, not just a walled garden in the sense that that it's already connecting between XRPL and ETH mainnet, and so just out the gate, it's not that. And I think from a functionality point of view, like we mentioned earlier, it's all about interoperability. So building the ability to interact with users from XRPL or assets on XRPL in the core of the network in a way that is super user-friendly and that enhances the utility of XRP for those communities is something that's been really important. The network architecture is decentralized in its nature, and the infrastructure is decentralized in its nature, and the token distribution is decentralized in its nature. So none of the things that would apply to a walled garden can really be considered as being applying to the Root Network.
So we could say it's actually a lot closer to a wall demolition service than a walled garden.
Yeah, we're trying to break down walls.
Exactly. But it leads into another question here, which is just if we could, I guess, elaborate a bit more on the nature of the relationship with Ripple. Are they just an investment partner, or are they playing a much bigger role in the whole Root Network?
I think they're a strategic partner. We have Monica Long, who's president of Ripple, on our board. We have XRPL and XRP pretty tightly integrated into the network, so there's a lot more going on than just a plain investment there.
Yeah. These are not, so we'll breeze over this quickly and merge these together. There are a few questions just around the nature of some of the bigger partnerships. I think quite straightforward. The bazookas that are all in play, yes, no. Are they still in play? And do we still have a plan to formally announce each of these?
Yeah, yes, and yes.
Yes. Perfect. And how do we plan on utilising the Root Network when it comes to our key partnerships and collabs for the, some of the big ones that we've brought through Futureverse recently with the likes of MasterCard and FIFA?
Yeah, I think like we spoke earlier, it's about creating that centre of gravity for others who want to build into that content ecosystem or application ecosystem. And so each of these activations that we'll bring onto Root will bring a different kind of capability and a different kind of audience, and not only kind of hopefully grow the amount of users interacting with Root, but showcase some of the really cool things that you can do with the network that might not have been possible before, particularly around that user experience domain. So the intention, like we talked about earlier, is that's that phase 2 of rollouts on the Root network in terms of functionality is very heavily centered around the partnerships and engaging those communities in what we're doing on Root, and hoping to do that in a variety of ways that are maybe not typical for Web3, so that we can get out there into a much broader ecosystem of users and bring them into what we're doing on Root network, and by doing that create value for that core community of Futureverse fans, because they're the ones that are going to be extracting value from the network no matter what is happening on what application. They're the ones that are going to benefit from that activity, whether it's directly linked to their assets or not. The future score system and the token distribution system means that they're a participant in that value creation.
Now, I'm just keeping an eye on the Discord as well as we go. I'm conscious that obviously we started late, so as long as you've still got the availability, we'll probably extend this through till 11:30 ish New Zealand time. So that will be, I think, 4:30 Pacific time. We will get through maybe another 5 or 6 of the pre-prepared questions, and then we'll open it up to the team or to the wider community to come through with any questions that we may not have touched on. Quite a straightforward one here, probably something that we've touched on a lot just in terms of the nature of interoperability, but there's a general question here: what is the possibility of connecting to other metaverses? So if that's, I guess, obviously there is no other metaverse. There is only one metaverse. It is the future of the internet, and there are different experiences and platforms that are building on the metaverse. But when we look at some of the existing bigger partners that are in the space, how's our approach in terms of those collaborations moving forward?
I think that the first part is right. It's the metaverse exists as a kind of single entity of interoperable applications and content and experiences. And what we talked about earlier is the Root network isn't just a blockchain. It's a toolkit for creating interoperable content and applications. And so that's kind of core mission for the Root network, and we are bootstrapping that ourselves by creating a bunch of those applications and showing how they can interoperate, and then we're partnering with others to help them activate their experiences or their brands and connect those to that greater set of users and assets. So that's literally the mission of Root, is to be that layer which provides the connectivity between content and applications in the open metaverse.
Can you provide some insight into how staking will work on the Root network? I know we've touched on it briefly already.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way to explain it is anyone can set up a validator as long as they have enough people who are tokens themselves or people who delegate to them. They'll be eligible to be included in the validator set, and then the network algorithms will take over at that point and pick validators in the network. So they'll be part of the set that secures the network for those epochs and be eligible for the rewards distributed during that period. The change we want to make in version 2 is to make the flow of rewards step down into validators who might not be chosen in the set of network validators in that epoch. And so there's an incentive to keep running infrastructure if you're a smaller validator or nominated group while you build up, and for more infrastructure to be available to decentralize the network.
All right. Now, there's a lot of questions here relating to the rollout of rewards through these various challenges for the Root network. There was obviously an update to the Futureverse white paper a couple of weeks ago that introduced some changes. Can you just take a moment to, I guess, elaborate on the specifics of those changes and I guess provide a high-level overview of what we expect to see when it comes to the rollout of these challenges and future token reward distributions over the latter half of this year?
Yeah, and so just to sum up what is happening with the way that the Root Network Token Rewards program is working is people will be able to create a FuturePass account like they can today. And in that account, you'll start to see a future score appear. A future score is a rank that's based on a number of factors. Those factors include the assets that you link to your FuturePass account, the rarity of those assets, the time you've held them, the time you continue to hold them, the activities they have participated in, and a host of other things that we can modify from time to time to drive adoption and engagement in the network. And so things like, for example, if you completed a challenge, that could affect your future score just by doing the challenge itself. And so it's designed to reward active participation by the ecosystem and to interact with the assets that the users have in their wallets that are linked to their FuturePass. Each month, challenges will be set, and each challenge will be allocated a certain number of Root Network tokens, and then the number of tokens you get will depend on your future score, your individual future score. And so we kind of turn the network into its own play-to-earn game. You know, making games like the games that involve your assets running around inside of worlds and stuff like that takes quite a bit of time. And so in the interim, while those things are going on, you can play the future score game and start to help us to test and optimize and grow the Root network as part of that process.
And there are a few questions here around, stuff that we can't necessarily go into in terms of the specific distribution of Root per collection, per asset, etc. We can say, however, that, there's a question here, will all stars be eligible for Root rewards? Yes, definitely. Everything that is a Futureverse asset plays into at least the future score, if not some of the challenges along the way as well.
Yeah, so we can mix and match. There could be FLUF-specific challenges, for example, or trait-specific challenges, or collection-specific challenges. And in each one of those, collections that are core Futureverse collections will be eligible for the future score system.
Do we have, out of the community pool that was identified within the white paper, which we increased by 100% in the latest update, is there an approximate timeline over the full course of how long it will take to distribute those rewards? Is it 3 years, 5 years, somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, well, it's not distribution. Let's be clear about that. It's people playing a game and earning rewards inside of that game, and the game is the future score game. And the exact timeline will be dependent on participation, but it'll probably take a couple of years to get through that full process. We're trying to make it a little bit adaptive, so it could be shorter or longer depending on network participation, the way that the community grows on the network in terms of utility, the liquidity of Root in the market, a bunch of other factors, but likely to be a couple of years.
Okay, and also I guess that leads into just a side question here, which was that if someone fails to complete their, time-gated challenge within, by the end date, is there any way for them to claim those tokens? I believe the answer there is no. You need to complete the challenge.
It'll depend on the challenge. So each challenge will specify whether it's time-bound or not.
Perfect. Are you able to elaborate a bit more on the plan for the SensNet to root burn function?
Not really at this point. We're going to try and get this first set of features off and out the door. We'll probably do a follow-up AMA, which we can go into a bit more detail on that, just to say that it's still eligible, and once we confirm the process to do the swap, all the details around how that will work will be part of that process.
All right. And do we have an approximate order of rollout for, say, the next, like the FLUF Party Bear bridges, those sorts of challenges? Or is it all, I guess, just a wait and see at this stage?
We have a roadmap for challenges, and each month there'll be new challenges issued. This month's challenges are focusing on the second part of the TNL challenge, as well as some challenges associated with the Future Pass and Future Score launches and staking. So that's kind of the roadmap for this month. Each month we'll get a new set of challenges out, which we'll let the community know in advance so that they can start to gear up to play those parts of the game. We're not asking anyone to bridge fluffs or party bears. I mean, obviously you can do that, and there might be reasons you want to do that. Maybe it's functionality that will be available on Root Network within applications. Maybe it's because the gas is cheaper and you want to use the on-chain marketplace within Root. But there is going to be no specific directive to do that, because we talked about earlier around user safety and making sure that people have the least risk in the types of interactions they're doing on Root.
Before I continue, a quick word from our sponsors that make the show possible.
Introducing Fraz Cola, the world's premier beer-flavored beverage.
It's Fraz, delicious, highly nutritious, with a top-secret recipe that's so delicious.
Nothing beats the buzz of a cool Fraz Cola. What are you waiting for?
We're getting Fraz to the NAS!
Consume at your own risk. Symptoms may include and death.
Of course, it's up to the people themselves to determine what they want to do with their assets. That said, we did announce earlier in the year that we'll be doing a special Scene and Sound for Chinese New Year, which I believe will be one of the next challenges to roll out after we complete this stage of Next Legends challenges. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. And one more question here related to rewards. Then we'll probably open this up to live questions. Can you comment whether users who participated in the Goblin Amulets in Genesis Mint have any additional kind of root challenges or unlocking of root tokens on the horizon?
Every trait counts. Just not every time.
Exactly. All right. Well.
Yeah. In general, we want this stuff to be interactive and to kind of have a bit of a surprise element each month. I think that was one of the things that we did early on in FLUF World that was really powerful, was kind of keep the engagement high by starting, by bringing a little bit of surprise. And so I think with the challenges, we're going to kind of try and continue that, make it as fun as possible by making it dynamic and coming up with something new for people to experience each month.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone who submitted a question. Obviously, we weren't able to get through all of them. but I want to ensure that we do provide some time for live questions. This is an AMA after all, and I can see a few people that have already requested to come up. If you do have a burning question that you'd like to ask, feel free to request to come up and speak on the spaces. You can also fire a question just into the general channel in our Discord, tag me, just so I make sure that I see those as these are coming through. We have, here we go, Kizu coming up now, and Tybo as well. All right, Tybo, we'll go with you first, as you seem like you're up and ready to go. How's it going?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Awesome. Well, there was a question that MetaBlocks asked, and it's related to bringing out the initial liquidity of the root token. Do we assume that the distribution will be more bang for your buck earlier on, or will the distribution be pretty similar, or it all depends on your future score when it comes to how much root tokens you'll get as an individual? I guess when I'm asking,
I really can't answer questions like this, and I know people want to have me say something specific around these, but this is the type of question that we just can't cross that boundary for. We've tried to provide as much information as possible without crossing over the wrong side of the road on speculation here, and I just can't get into that level of detail.
No worries. Well, my actual question was, it says in the white paper that people can actually build utility with the actual root token. Do you see your do you see your partners doing that? So the big partners that you guys have been hinting at, do you see them creating utility for the root token, or is that just for more of the Web3 crowd?
I think, like we've said before, like our vision of success for end users is that they don't have to know that those things exist, and the experiences that we create on Root, all of that creates network value. You know, whether the user knows Root exists or not. And one of the questions that was asked that we didn't get to in the community submitted questions was, you know, how do you intend to activate brand partnerships? You know, people have tried to do that in the past, and it's had, you know, relatively low success. I think part of that is because people have tried to bring users in a very overtly Web3 centric way, as opposed to providing them with a cool experience that gives them something unique that they couldn't do before and onboards them in a way that's seamless and feels natural. And that's where our focus is keeping the experience for the users front of mind, not the tokens front of mind. You look at most of the play to earn games and a lot of the angst, you know, in the general gamer community around Web3, it's because of this overly overt focus on economics and on financialization of the experience. And if we can step back from that and think about what's an engaging and exciting user experience, what's something that they could do now that they couldn't do before. And by the way, that's powered by this infrastructure, and you don't even have to know that it exists. So that's the philosophy. And our, you know, in each one of those activations, they will drive utility for Group because they use the network. And every time someone's interacting with the network, it drives utility for the token. But the people who need to know about that and who play that game, that infrastructure game, will be a much smaller subset of the overall community. So the short answer is yes. Long answer is yes, but they don't care. You know, what they want to see is something that their users can do something cool, and that they can engage in an experience that they didn't have the power to do before. And and that by its nature will create utility for Root.
Yeah.
Now there will be a crowd of people out there who are, let's call them the Web3 natives, that want to get into making direct utility on the network for the Root token or other tokens in the ecosystem, and that's something we'll encourage through the likes of those accelerator programs.
Yeah, awesome. So will we see activations with these partners this year? So, because you talk about it as an idea, are we going to see like this in real time this year? Is that what we're expecting?
Definitely.
Or awesome.
I mean, like we've said before, like there's no point in going out and talking about this stuff unless you can drive users through to a call to action, and there's no point in having that call to action before the infrastructure is ready to support it. And so you can see we're ramping up now into that phase of having the infrastructure tested. You guys are doing a great job out there and participating in the challenges. We're getting really good results from those, and we're pleased with the way that that's tracking, and that's building up confidence and bringing on that next layer of partners. We talked about those 3 steps: our content, partner contents, the wider world's contents. That second step is definitely something we see happening this year, and to a certain extent already is. We've got tens of thousands of people signing up and playing the FIFA experience already in beta on one app store with no marketing, or creating future passes on the Futureverse network, and so on the Root network, sorry. And so, quietly confident that we can continue to execute on that plan.
All right. Thanks.
I'll take it. Yeah, that's me for now. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tybo. Kizu, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Good morning, guys. I know. What time is it? Like 11?
Yeah, 11, 11:15.
All right. So, anyway, let me jump to the question. So, what I'm wondering here is, I'm trying to picture how we're going to interact with going to something like, you just press arrows on your keyboard and go around, or is it going to be something like you put the VR goggles on, you speak to your FLUF, you tell them to go tell the Goblin King to direct this attack, and then come back home and tell the Seeker to fix the car, and speak to it via voice. Can you guys give us a little bit?
What's this for? Sorry, I missed a little bit of your question at the beginning.
Yeah, I was saying I'm trying to picture how we're going to interact with our assets in the Futureverse.
Yeah. The Futureverse isn't a place. So that's I think that's probably the first thing to remember. Futureverse is a company that's building a platform.
And the third kingdom, you're right, my bad.
Yeah. So in the third kingdom, there'll be lots of different kinds of things that you can do. One of the types of things that we want to enable in the early days is that idea of missions. And so there's 2 ways that we can bring that to life, probably 3 stages. There's, the stage that we're doing with FutureScore itself. And so that's kind of at the network game layer. And then there's a second phase, which will feel more familiar as a game, let's call it, game experience. And then there's the third stage, which is in kind of the fully immersive spaces. In terms of how you'll interact with your characters, a lot of the focus for us on the experience inside of Third Kingdom is driven by our AI tools. We really want the Third Kingdom to be, the best showcase for enabling users to create the open metaverse, through the power of their imaginations. And I think we're actually organizing a little bit of a leak after this spaces of some of the work the team's been doing to enable things like type to animate for your characters. You talked about what's the type of thing you'd be able to do, where you would literally be able to type an instruction for your character, and that will animate it for you. And that animation can be a one-time thing, or you could save it a loop scenario, for example, if you wanted to create a mini experience inside of your part of the third kingdom.
So can I speak to them? Like, can I speak via voice, via the mic?
We aren't working on speech to text yet, but I mean, I guess theoretically it's possible. It's harder to do on a universal basis, but it's not a huge leap to, once we've got text prompts, to enable a speech path for that.
Okay, cool. And I don't know if I missed it because I was a few minutes late, but did you already mention how we can get ready for the accelerator, for the root accelerator? Is there some
so we'll launch the application process in this quarter. So I think the best thing to do in the interim is just get your standard documentation around what your value proposition is and how you're going to leverage the Futureverse, toolkit and the root network experience in that process.
Okay, so is there going to be information besides the white paper, or is that where we're getting the information that we would base ourselves on when it comes to the value proposition?
Yeah, no, there'll be with the value propositions in the white paper for sure for the root network. So you can go and read up on that. But in terms of the other tools in the Futureverse toolkit, those will start to come out through those developer experiences that we talked about earlier launching.
Okay, cool. And is it official, like the root accelerator, is that live yet? Is it coming soon? Do we have a date, or just we'll find out?
Yeah, in this quarter we'll be launching. It's the Born Ready accelerator in partnership with Outlier Ventures.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Gizu. Just before we bring up a few others, I'll fire through a couple that have just been posted in the Discord. Very quick one, what would you consider the statuses of the root network currently? Is it, still in alpha, in beta? Is it launched in version 1?
I think that the network's definitely launched. I would say we're probably in alpha moving to beta. I'd consider us in beta once staking's, community staking goes live this month, and the tokens out in the hands of community members. In the alpha phase, we've been pretty pleased with the performance so far. There are tens of thousands of NFTs on the network already, and FuturePass process has been pretty good with a lot of enhancements coming through that first round of feedback. Moving into beta would be probably that next step in this phase as we roll out staking and root token this month.
Nice. Another question here from Floating Coconut. I'm not sure if we're able to answer this as it relates to SENS, which you said would probably be a separate space sometime in the near future. But as a question on SENS, the recent downward price action is due to a BitThump exchange announcement about the lack of development and inability to contact the development foundation. It is now a decentralized public blockchain. What involvement does Futureverse have in that going forward, given centrality is changed to Futureverse on the New Zealand Companies Register, and also other Korean users quite aware of Futureverse and Root?
I don't know. I can't really comment on what BitThump's own processes are, but I don't think that the statement that the developer team's been uncontactable is a true one. Our guys have reached out to them to see what's going on there. I think there's been some pressures internally within BitThump to look at listing of foreign-based projects. Maybe it's got caught up in that, but it's certainly not as a result of us or the developer team being able to be contactable.
And one final question here from Discord, and then we'll bring up a few of these requested speakers. I think we've already kind of touched on this, but what happens to people who don't have time to participate in the challenges?
I don't know. Find time. Build a guild. What would you normally do in a play to earn game scenario? I think there's lots of options out there. I think probably people would develop the ability for people to lease their character assets, for example, to those who could play games. I know there are several organizations working on that functionality already. So yeah, I think that's probably the path it'll go down, like the rest of the play to earn ecosystem out there.
Nice. All right, now let's bring up a few more of these potential speakers. We've got Money GCC and Mo Meta. Money GCC, I think you had requested first. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great, perfect. I wasn't actually going to ask a question, but Aaron had brought up in the investors coming in, and I have a question. One of the core things that attracted me to Futureverse was the values that you guys portrayed, as in we're building the Futureverse. As you take on more investment from outside investors, especially those from Silicon Valley, are you protecting your core values from these corporate entities' influence in a way contractually?
I think the simple answer to that is that, well, there's probably two parts. They made investments in us and our vision, and so if they didn't believe in our vision and our values, then they wouldn't have made those investments. I think that's probably the simplest way to answer it. The people who get what we're doing or believe in what we're doing, believe in it because of that vision. You can see that in the other investments that some of those shareholders have made, that they truly believe in this space and growing a more decentralized internet and helping the open metaverse to become a reality. There's no way that you can kind of contractually bind them to have the same values and viewpoint as you, and there's no doubt that they have a financial motivation for making those investments. But in the abstract of, understanding and backing our vision, they wouldn't be putting that kind of commitment behind us. It takes a decent amount of money to build what we've been building and what we intend to build, much more than the revenue that we've gained so far, and so they're just as committed to that outcome and that vision as we are.
Okay, because I only worry about this from the aspects. I'm looking at it from like a Jack Dorsey perspective, and that's what has me a little bit worried. From the point he took money from outside investors, he lost complete control of Twitter at one point. So I'm just looking at it from that type of reference point. So just if you guys are aware and just like how you're plan on working that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that it's a consideration in the process. But yeah, when you go through something like this, and our investors took over a year of diligence and getting to know us, they know what we stand for and what we're about. There's no change in what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to achieve it. And the same things we're telling you today about our strategy to do that are the same things that they've bought into. Without putting words in their mouth, if that alignment wasn't there, they wouldn't be making those investments.
Great, I appreciate you answering my questions. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man.
Thanks, Bunny. Mo Meta, you there?
Morning, guys. Alex, Aaron, thank you for having me up. Really appreciate you putting this on today. I just want to give a quick shout out to everybody in the room as well. I've just looked through all those PFPs, and it's like a big family in here, so it's really great to see. Thanks, everybody, for showing up.
Love it.
Now, my questions. I got two. The first one being, there's a bit of speculation going out about if you socially participate on social media, You do a bit of posting. I'm partial to a bit of a shit post myself. Is that potentially going to be helping our future score? If so, when is that being tracked from the creation of the Future Pass wallet? And how would you track something? Algorithms, API plugins? Can you give us anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is definitely social activity is one of the things that and community activity is one of the things we want to include in the Futureverse score. In terms of how to track that, it'll be an opt-in process, and people will be given the opportunity to take that up or not. Certainly not going to go out there and kind of mine your data. That's not what we're about. But yeah, we'll try and make that an engaging experience, and probably a challenge in its own right, to do that process of opting in, and then from there take either specific challenges that help us reach our goals in terms of growth, or historical activity, and build that into future score.
Yeah, I think that's a really good play, because I've seen so much more interaction since that speculation came out. I love to see it. I love to see the community out there.
I mean, this is the point, right? Is like, trying to make this process of growing Root a community-driven process. It has to be successful. And so all of the challenges and all of the methods for improving the future score are going to be driving in some direction, either more utility in the ecosystem, more awareness in the ecosystem, helping us test ideas and concepts and technology along the way before we scale it up to bigger audiences. You're our core, and you're playing multiple levels of game with us, and this being one of the kind of core games that our community can play is to help participate in that growth process. And we can only be successful with the community's participation. You look at every successful Web3 project out there, the ones that have really made it are all based on what the community has gone and done to contribute. And we're providing hopefully the good infrastructure and kind of bedrock of content and capability and awareness through our partnerships to help you on that journey, but we can only do it together.
Yeah, I would love to see a whole new model of how we incentivize content creators to put that content out there through a whole new means, rather than sponsoring them, but by rewarding them, because there's no stronger proof of work than what those guys do for this community as far as making that content. And if there's a way to build that into the economic model in some way, it'd be brand new, never done before, and create so many other people to come in and make content about the Futureverse, because, they up their future score, and just how you track it.
It's all about that.
Sweet. Okay. Couple of technical ones, probably can't answer them. I'm thinking about the XLS 30D and the 38D regarding the automated market maker, and of course, the chain side of it, the interoperability with the 38D. Are either of those two XRPL amendments playing a role in the Root network?
Yeah, well, the AMM one's definitely one we've got our eye on. Like I mentioned earlier, we want to be able to connect the Root network AMM runtime to source liquidity. Once that's available, and that's something we're working directly with the team over there on. In terms of interoperability, we already have that bridge connecting the XRPL to Root, and I think in an upcoming release we'll be doing the XLS20 integration as well. So I think on that side we're not gaining a lot necessarily from that, but the AMM one is one that we've got tabs on at the moment.
Yeah, the order book as well as the market maker. And actually, while we're on markets, the marketplace for the Root network, like regarding the creator tools and minting NFTs, that's really exciting for new people coming in. Can you touch on that marketplace at all and sort of the parameters around it?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, it's the runtime within Root allows people to build marketplace interfaces on top of that. So we expect there to be more than one that pops up, but we've been working with a developer to get the first, let's call it, marketplace operating on top of Root, and do that in a way that aligns with our philosophy about how this stuff will work going forward. So we'll be sharing a little bit more this month about Mark, and how Mark will help us to enable marketplace functionality inside of different experiences that connect to the Futureverse, and how Mark's different from perhaps what you've seen from other marketplaces in terms of the user experience and creator tools. So that's going to be a really cool thing to get out there and start to get the community to engage with, to see where we can take the notion of a marketplace from being a static website into something that's a little bit more dynamic, personal, and integrated into the applications that users are engaging with.
I love the way it's already got a name. Hopefully it'll maybe even have a form as well. That'd be cool if we could actually see Mark as a form, and then of course where there's a form, there's an AI option. All right, that's my lot, guys. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for having me up.
Cheers.
We've got 3 people here that have requested. Do you have time to take a quick question from each of them before we wrap this up?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Bildo, are you there?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm just wondering if you can go into any more detail of how the future score may be calculated. Is it something that we would have a base score that we could always rely on based on the assets? Is it real time if I sell or acquire more assets? Is it something that immediately affects my score? Or if I have and hold everything from one challenge to the next, then as I do challenges, that increases my score? Or any more details on how that may kind of be affected or put together, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to give the parameters of what makes up the score without getting into exactly how those parameters are calculated, both because we want to make the gameplay a little bit more dynamic, and also because there needs to be a restriction in terms of gaming the system, and lastly because if you can make a direct correlation between say a particular asset in the score, then that kind of unwinds a lot of the elements we've put in place to help us ensure that we get these token rewards happening in a way that is compliant with the understood landscape on the regulatory side of things. So we won't get into specifics, but we will say, hey, these kinds of activities or these kinds of traits or these kinds of values contribute to the score. People might want to then go and reverse engineer those things. We've got a whole bunch of sleuths in the community that no doubt will, and I think that we'll start to see some optimization as a result of that, but there's no intention to disclose exactly how it works.
Yeah, I guess my view of it is kind of like a credit score, that there's no exact science of your credit score will be this if you do X, Y, and Z, but there are some general parameters that if you're doing X, Y, and Z, you should always remain in a higher tier of score to maximize credit in the best way possible.
Yeah, and I think those are the kinds of things that we've outlined in the white paper update. Things like the type of asset you have, how long you hold it for, the rarity of that asset, and the floor price of that asset. All of those things contribute to, let's call them the more static elements of the future score.
And would it be an ongoing thing, or is there?
Oh yeah.
It won't reset every month when a new challenge is set up. It's like, okay, now we're recalculating your score, and your starting score is this.
The score is constantly recalculated because it's based on what you've linked to your future pass and the activities that you do. So So it is dynamic in that sense. But if you don't change those kind of, fundamental aspects, then the score itself isn't going to change too much.
Gotcha. And it would be real time then too, as if you acquire or sell, your score would be immediately impacted then.
Yeah, I won't say real time because there's a bit of data wizardry that goes on in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
Gotcha.
responsive.
Cool. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Builder. Armando, are you there?
Yes, hello. Just wanted to ask a question around, obviously TNL is getting their 100 root tokens airdropped on the 9th when they're due to bridge. Can you speak, I understand if you can't, but can you speak to when root will be tradable on the DEX?
Yeah, I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
All good. Thank you anyway.
Cheers.
Thanks, Armando. Kiriana.
Hey, gents. Slight tangent, but I'm sure the whole community would love to hear a bit of an update on what the expectations should be around the new delivery date for the Third Kingdom white paper.
I think I gave quite a bit of feedback on that in Discord. I spent about 3 hours in there yesterday talking about that. Did you see the summary of those things?
I saw some of it.
Yeah, so it's not, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than a yes or no question. But like I mentioned in the Discord, we've had some pretty amazing and significant development in the partner ecosystem, which is affecting how we roll out the Third Kingdom. So we'll get back to you once we've gone through that process with the partner.
Okay, and then just one last question, if you don't mind, if we've got the time.
Go for it.
Awesome. So one of the things, someone who's been around since, the early days, it's been great seeing how everything is, pivoted towards more of the tech stack. And the building is, going on behind the scenes. As a community member, it's difficult for us to string the bits together and, it leads to a lot of speculation. And game building does take a long time. A lot of us are new to gaming and we're learning as we go around what this process should look like and setting the correct expectations for the community. If you had to put a time frame around it as a guesstimate or an estimate, what sort of expectations should the community have around having actual Futureverse games finished? Are we talking multi-year expectations to build?
I think it depends on the game. I mean, the intention is to roll out experiences in kind of a succession of steps as opposed to wait for one big bang. And the notion of game can be multi-dimensional as well. Like you can all now play a game with your assets with the future score, right out the gate without having to have anything else happen. In terms of the experiences on top of that, each one of those will start to release in layers. We're pretty much now close to having our first out of beta game live with the FIFA AA League. So that's something that we can consider is pretty close to being done. And then the number of other experiences on top of that, which will increasingly get towards that end goal of what we think of as like a immersive metaverse world over the next few years.
That's awesome. I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into playing AFA on my iPhone or the FIFA version of that.
Yeah.
If we talked about breeding and flufflets, for example, right back at the beginning, that was one of the initial things that we talked about. Realistically, how long do you think that might be away?
Yeah, I'm not going to put a timeline on it because we just get hammered if we do.
Oh, no, that's fair. But I guess
all I can say is we've been waiting for Root to go live and making sure that we've got the demand side of the partnerships lined up so that there's a reason to have flufflets.
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. I guess all I'm trying to do is to help sort of people understand what their expectations are versus what the reality might be around building some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good set of questions, and you can see this across, if you look at any, of the bigger titles in Web3 or in the traditional gaming world, it is a lot more work, and it's something that I think maybe was underestimated across the board in terms of the timelines to get this stuff out in the open. And we're not just building the experience itself, we're building all the infrastructure to make that a truly open metaverse experience. So our internal philosophy and drive has been like, how can we stage out utility and experiences along that journey so that it's not just waiting the 2 to 3 years that it takes. I think Sandbox is still in beta to get to the point that you've got this kind of fully interoperable world or environment that people are imagining.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks, gents. I appreciate your time.
Thanks
Cool,
so much
thank
for
you.
being honest. All right, Siobhan, do you have one final question for us to finish on?
Oh, no pressure. Well, great day, y'all. Appreciate everybody making the time to jump on this. So, first off, want to say congratulations on whatever the partner is that came through in the final hour.
Thank you.
No, for sure. And just on that point, I have zero experience building something to the scale that you all are doing, but thinking about someone asked you earlier, will we expect to see some of these partners have their activations go live before end of year? And I'm curious if you all have set any sort of timeline internally of saying, okay, at this point, we are going to freeze the product, so to say, and make sure that everything moves forward, even if that means we have to tell a partner, hey, we're going to have to work you in later down the road, just for the sake of knowing that there is some, hey, by X date or X year, we want to make sure that we start to push this thing to its different phases, and knowing that aspect of the product will be locked in, understandably from what you've communicated, and I choose to believe, what you've communicated as far as the significance of the partner who has kind of changed things a bit. But hopefully my question there makes sense about freezing the product parameters and shipping, even if that means turning down something that otherwise you would have wanted to include if it, wouldn't set things back a bit.
We're shipping every week. I mean, I don't think that there's ever a point where you can freeze a product. Products need to evolve and they need to respond to market conditions and partner requirements and all of those kinds of things. So to say that a product's frozen is kind of it's not how you do product management anyway, unless you're like very close to pushing something out the door in terms of the product itself. Where we were at with the process around Third Kingdom was certainly not at the point of pushing product out. It was pushing out information, and so product development is going to keep happening. And I think already this year the team has shipped a half a dozen or more new products into the Futureverse stack. So they are a team that continues to ship product. I think. In terms of the process around sharing information, some of the time we can make those calls and say, look, we're just going to go ahead and do shit. Some of the times, and particularly when you're working with, the largest brands in the world, you are constrained about what you can and can't say, and when you can and can't say it, and how you can and can't say it. And unfortunately, that's just the cost of doing business with these large brands, is we have less control over that process. So on the one hand, it's yay, we've got those things in our belt. On the other hand, it's also, hey, we've got to work with these people who just don't operate on the same schedule as we do. So you've got to take the good with the bad, unfortunately.
Sorry, my Twitter almost rugged me.
Did that answer the question?
Unmute myself. Siobhan dropped off there for a second. Let me just add him back. Siobhan, you there?
Apologies, my phone was tweaking out when you first started responding there, and so I had to jump down and jump back up. But totally get that. Just, while we had the opportunity, just wanted to throw that out there. But, yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for your questions. Thank you, Aaron, for your time today. I hope that answered all, most, if not all, of the questions that everyone had. Obviously, we are always constrained on time. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, Twitter's rocking. Hello, can you hear me? Oh,
am I still here? Okay, I think Alex has been rugged, so it's up to me to say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for coming and listening in. Hopefully got a bunch of the questions answered today. We'll definitely start to host some more of these now that we're getting down to the wire with the network and start to provide the opportunity for other communities to come and listen to the story and hear the questions. We'll probably get back to you with the recording so that you can listen to share this afterwards for those who perhaps weren't able to attend. And Alex will probably provide some summaries of questions that we couldn't get to that were submitted through the form prior to this AMA. So thanks again, everyone, for the time. Appreciate your support so far, getting towards a really exciting stage in our evolution, and let's make this a success together.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. If you can hear me. If not, I'm just talking to myself as a
Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoy this content, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and maybe consider watching one of my other videos. Bunnies up!